"Adeline, please, hurry up. I'm already running late," Jacob said, standing by the open door of their expensive car and tapping his foot impatiently. His wife looked at him in confusion. His face clearly showed irritation. "Just a moment," she requested, taking one last look at the hospital building where she had spent the past month recovering from a miscarriage. Her eyes were still red from crying. Adeline couldn't remember ever crying as much as she had after her loss. "Adeline," her husband raised his voice, "there's no time to wait for you." She quickly wiped away a couple of tears that had suddenly rolled down her cheeks and hurried into the car. "Jacob, I feel so awful," she said a few minutes later as they drove along the highway leading to the settlement. "You always feel awful," her husband interrupted harshly. "When you got pregnant and started having that miserable morning sickness, you were constantly in a bad mood, always complaining. And then, when you miscarried, you fell into a deep depression. You didn't want to see anyone and even refused to talk to anyone, including me." "Jacob," Adeline looked at him reproachfully, but he continued to scold her sternly. "And all this time, no matter how many times I tried to explain that a miscarriage isn't the end of the world and that you can still have children. Remember, it wasn't me who said it, but the doctor. Throughout this whole ordeal, you never once bothered to ask how I was coping with it all. It was always about you. You and only you. You're such an egoist." Adeline pursed her lips in offence and fell silent. Over the past 6 months, she had indeed felt a sharp lack of attention from her husband, and for good reason. Jacob was considered a highly successful businessman in their city. He spent day and night at work, striving to take his leather furniture company to the national level. However, his dedication to business was bordered on obsession. Every conversation, one way or another, revolved around how to better and faster develop his business and make even more money. Family and wife seemed to take a back seat. Thus, Adeline, who modestly worked as a web designer from home, increasingly felt lonely and unwanted. Her parents had long since passed away, and she had few friends. Only Megan, whom she met after moving to this city, understood Adeline's problems and became her sole confidant, preventing her from going mad with loneliness. Despite this, Adeline tried to devote most of her time to her family and household. She managed, without the help of a housekeeper, to keep their large and beautiful home clean and to cook various delicious meals for her husband's return. From the outside, their family might have seemed like a perfect example to emulate, but as soon as they crossed the threshold of their home, the facade crumbled, revealing an unappealing reality. "How can you blame me at a time like this?" Adeline asked softly, once her husband finished his tirade. "When I started feeling unwell, you asked me to call an ambulance and not to bother you with such trivialities." Adeline looked at her husband intently as he drove. "You can't compare the two," he replied without looking at her. "I was in a crucial meeting that determined the fate of the entire company and our financial well-being." Adeline turned away and silently gazed out the window. Last month she turned 34 and desperately wanted to have this baby, knowing that her chances of pregnancy would only decrease with each passing year. "Jacob, none of this might have happened if you had occasionally put me first instead of your work. You're always away on business trips, in meetings and hardly ever home. I'm in so much pain over losing our baby, but we're both to blame for what happened, don't you think?" She looked at him hopefully, desperately wanting his words to evoke at least some understanding, if not sympathy. "I think I'm just incredibly tired," he replied coldly. "Tired of you and this pointless conversation. When we get home, iron my suit for tomorrow's meeting." Jacob gave his wife a few more household instructions before they spent the rest of the ride in complete silence. A month went on, and one day, Adeline received an unexpected call from a notary. It turned out She had inherited a small shabby house by the sea from her grandmother. Unfortunately, Adeline barely knew her grandmother. Adeline's mother, Bella, had a severe falling out with her own mother years ago, resulting in minimal communication between them. Adeline had only visited her grandmother once or twice, and barely remembered the sea or the little house where she once stayed. Still, recovering from her loss, Adeline had little interest in dealing with the formalities of inheriting the property. Truthfully, she didn't care what happened to the house. Judging by the photos sent by the notary, the house was in terrible condition. Restoring it would require a significant amount of money, and Adeline simply didn't have the time or energy to deal with it right now. "Well, let the house stand there and wait for my better days," Adeline said to Megan. "What do I need it for now? What am I supposed to do with it?" Megan, sitting across from her in the kitchen and sipping her coffee, widened her eyes in surprise. "Adeline, are you kidding? It's a house by the sea. Do you hear me? By the sea," she enunciated, tapping her temple with her finger. "How much longer are you going to mope around? Forever?" Adeline only sighed sadly. "Megan, please, not you too," she pleaded. "But it's absolutely insane to miss out on such an opportunity," Megan exclaimed excitedly. "On the contrary, when you go there, you'll finally get some peace of mind and emotional recovery. I won't even mention the climate, which is medically beneficial for you." The friends were so engrossed in their conversation that they didn't notice Jacob returning home. Hearing their voices, he was about to join them in the kitchen, but when he overheard them discussing an inheritance, the businessman instantly fell silent and listened intently. "Let's call your notary right now and ask him for all the details," Megan suggested. "We need to grab this house before another relative does." Megan took Adeline's phone, found the notary's number, and handed the device back to her friend. "Oh, who would want this old shack?" Adeline asked with a sad smile. "Oh, sweetie, you're so naive." Megan rolled her eyes. "Believe me, there are people who would love to get their hands on such a prime piece of land." Jacob, pressed against the wall, listened carefully. When Adeline called the notary and, putting the call on speakerphone, clarified all the details of her inheritance, Jacob felt his mouth go dry with greed. Coughing loudly, he finally entered the kitchen, pretending he had only heard the end of their conversation. "What's up, girls? Taking a break?" he asked casually, immediately shifting the topic to the weather and traffic jams. Then, as if in passing, he inquired, "Adeline, did I hear the word inheritance? Were you talking to a notary?" Adeline, flustered, briefly explained the situation. Jacob feigned boredom, as if the news was of no interest to him. "Got it. I thought it was something serious," he said dismissively, before retreating to the bedroom, leaving Adeline and Megan puzzled by his reaction. That same evening, lying to his wife about an urgent meeting, Jacob visited his longtime mistress, Josephine. After sharing the exciting news, he saw the same greedy gleam in her eyes. "Darling, this is fantastic," Josephine gushed. "Just imagine a house by the sea. Do you know how much land in such a picturesque location could be worth, if properly documented and put up for auction?" Josephine worked as a realtor in the same city where Jacob lived with his wife. In fact, he had met his mistress while purchasing their new home. "You're the expert in real estate deals," Jacob played along, pulling her close. "So, tell me." Josephine beamed with a wide smile, already calculating the potential value in her mind and dreaming of paying off her substantial debts with Jacob's money. "You have no idea how profitable this deal could be," she said, kissing him passionately. "But I have a condition. Take me with you to the sea when you go to sell the house," she added unexpectedly. "I want to oversee the entire sale process myself. That way you'll get the maximum benefit." Jacob looked slightly taken aback. "No problem, but first,
I need to convince my wife to sell that dump."
Josephine smiled slyly. "Then we need to hurry. Good land in that area gets snatched up quickly. We can't afford to let this opportunity slip through our fingers."
"I'll do everything in my power,"
Jacob promised, embracing her tightly.
"And once I get the money, I'll kick Adeline out, and then we can finally be together."
A few days later, to avoid arousing his wife's suspicions, Jacob intentionally cancelled an important meeting and stayed home.
"Adeline, let's talk," he said. "I think you've noticed I've been spending more time with you lately, and I did it for you."
Adeline looked at him with a surprised gaze. "What brought this on?" she asked cautiously. Jacob lowered his head before looking up at her with a regretful expression.
"I've been thinking. I haven't been fair to you. I should have spent more time with you when you were pregnant, but instead I was always focused on money."
Adeline looked away, saying nothing. Jacob continued, taking her hand for emphasis.
"Listen, I want to make things right. Let's start over, okay?"
His words were so warm and sincere that Adeline couldn't help but lean in closer. "I'm willing to try. What do you suggest?" Jacob smiled apologetically before gently embracing her.
"Remember the little house by the sea that you inherited from your grandmother? What if we sell it? I've heard we could get a good price for it, and with that money we could buy a real palace by the shore. We could go there every couple of months to relax, and maybe even solve your fertility issues. You still want a baby, right?"
He looked at her with love and adoration in his eyes. Adeline was incredibly touched that he finally put her interests above his own. "And you, Jacob, do you want to save our family?" Tears glistened in Adeline's eyes. Her husband nodded firmly.
"Darling, I've realized everything. I'm incredibly ashamed of how I treated you, so I really want us to have a second chance."
Adeline, unknowingly, had already fallen for her cunning husband's sweet talk. "Well, if that's the case, I'll call the notary and let him know we'll be arriving soon and that I'm accepting the inheritance," she said, hugging her husband. Jacob tightly embraced his wife so she wouldn't see the satisfied smirk that twisted his handsome lips. A happy Adeline gave her husband a tender kiss. That evening a bright ray of hope ignited in her soul once again. A few days later, she stood on the seashore, breathing in the clean, salty air. Everywhere she looked, beautiful, picturesque valleys stretched out before her. After years of city life, Adeline had almost forgotten that such beauty existed in the world. After signing all the necessary papers at the notary's office, she and her husband received the keys to her grandmother's house and headed to the designated location. It was a quiet seaside town, one of those that resembled small villages. To her surprise, Melody, her granny, had lived practically on the shore itself. Only a couple of 100 meters separated her tiny house from the endless expanse of the sea. "Oh, what a beautiful sight, isn't it, Jacob?" Adeline asked her husband excitedly, who was intently studying a local map at the time.
"You know," he replied absently, "your grandmother's house stands on a very valuable piece of land. I think we can sell it for an excellent price. We might not even need to offer a discount."
Adeline felt uncomfortable for a moment. Jacob was talking about money again, but the joy of reconnecting with nature and the fragments of memories tied to this place completely captivated her. She barely opened the old wooden door with the keys. Inside it was almost empty. Melody did not like unnecessary stuff, so the only items in the house were an old table, a couple of chairs, a bed, and an old bookcase that, however, contained fewer books. Melody's eyesight had deteriorated significantly towards the end of her life. She was very upset that she hadn't read enough. A creaky voice sounded behind Adeline. The young woman almost screamed in surprise, but when she turned around she saw only an old sailor in a faded shirt standing before her.
The elderly man with a thick beard looked at her warily with his grey eyes reminiscent of the sea before a storm. "I'm Tom Sanchez," the old man introduced himself, extending his tanned and wrinkled hand to her. "I'm Adeline Taylor," she replied, slightly stuttering as he shook her hand. The man's eyes instantly softened. "So, you're Melody's granddaughter. God rest her soul." The sailor quickly crossed himself. "I'm your neighbour. I've been living here for many years. Melody was a good friend of mine." Adeline felt embarrassed that she knew nothing about her grandmother. She smiled shyly at Mr. Sanchez, but her husband appeared behind her with a displeased expression. "Old man, how did you wander in here? Go back to your place before things get worse. No need to scare my wife." The sailor slowly turned around and looked at Adeline's husband with a disdainful gaze from head to toe. "Adeline, I see you're unlucky with your husband. A bourgeois and a sneak to boot." Jacob's eyes instantly filled with anger. "Old man, have you lost your mind? Get out of here before I call the police." "Jacob, what are you doing?" Adeline scolded him. "This man is a friend of my late grandmother. Please treat him with respect." Now it was Jacob's turn to be astonished by his own wife's audacity. "And what about him? Calling me a sneaky bourgeois? Whose side are you on?" "You started it," Adeline retorted. "Let's not argue. Mr. Sanchez, I apologise for this misunderstanding. Would you like to come over for tea this evening? We've rented an apartment nearby while we figure out what to do with the house." The sailor looked intently at Adeline, then at her angry husband, before politely declining, citing some urgent matters. "If you want to find me, I live over there, behind the stone fence on the hill," Mr. Sanchez said finally. "I'm always glad to see you." Giving Jacob one last unfriendly glance, the old sailor slowly walked away. "Crazy old man." Jacob shook his head and returned to studying the map. "Thank goodness we won't see him again." "Why?" Adeline asked. "I want to visit him sometime while we're here and ask him about my grandmother." "Absolutely not," Jacob said in a commanding voice. "You don't even know him. How do you know he was even acquainted with your grandmother? What if he's some kind of maniac who made up this story to... Oh, I don't even want to think about it." Jacob shuddered, then suggested going to their rented apartment and waiting for him there while he checked out a couple more places. "I want to see if there are any decent realtors around here," he explained. Jacob was far from being as straightforward as Josephine had hoped. The man understood that his lover had her own designs on the money that could be obtained from selling the house by the sea and the accompanying land. To ensure Josephine didn't interfere, Jacob left her in their hometown under the pretext that he needed to thoroughly inspect the property first, and then he would let her know when she could come. The lover was very displeased with this, but Jacob stood his ground, and now he was calmly heading to meet the best realtor in the area. Mr. Perez, the specialist's name, immediately identified Jacob as a man eager for a quick enrichment. The realtor himself was the kind of person who could easily compromise his conscience if offered a good percentage. "Don't worry, Jacob, we'll do everything for you in the best way," the cunning realtor reassured him. "The main thing is to wait for my call. I think in a week or two I'll find someone willing to pay a more than generous price for your plot." The realtor extended his hand to the businessman, who confidently shook it. "Excellent. I hope we understand each other," Jacob said meaningfully, raising his eyebrows. "Believe me, if you do your job well, I won't disappoint you with the money. Just remember, don't tell my wife anything. It would be a shame if she found out the true value of her land." When Mr. Perez assured the businessman that he had nothing to fear regarding the confidentiality of the information, and Jacob, fully satisfied with himself, left the office. Upon returning to the apartment he and Adeline had rented, the man was surprised to find that his wife was not home. On the kitchen table a short note awaited him. "Jacob, I've gone to Mr. Sanchez's place. Don't call me. I'll be back closer to evening. Adeline." The businessman was very dissatisfied with his wife's desire to continue communicating with the elderly sailor, especially since the perceptive old man had immediately seen through him. Knowing Adeline's impressionability, Jacob feared that the old sea-wolf might turn her against him, thus ruining his main plan.
"Well, Adeline, when you return in the evening I'll give you a piece of my mind. You're no better than to defy your husband's will," Jacob thought to himself, while composing messages to his accountant. He wanted to prepare a safe account in advance where he could transfer all the money after the deal was done. Currently, the most important thing for him was to wait for the signal from the realtor. Meanwhile, Adeline found Mr. Sanchez's house and the man himself. Not far from the neat stone cottage, the elderly man had set up a fishing spot. The old sailor warmly greeted the woman when she called out to him and invited her into his home. A little later, enjoying a hearty fish soup, Adeline asked him to tell her about her grandmother. "You see, I was very young then, and after the quarrel between my mum and my granny, we barely communicated. I remember receiving a few letters for the holidays, but Mum didn't even read them. She threw them away immediately."
"Yes, Melody and your mother indeed had a complicated relationship,"
the sailor nodded.
"Bella was very impulsive, always wanting to leave her and go to the capital. She didn't like the sea."
Mr. Sanchez shook his head before continuing.
"When Bella met your father, Melody was furious with her daughter. Of course, he was from the capital, a city slicker with all the trimmings. He turned your mother's head and took her away, leaving Melody alone. That's when their estrangement began."
"But they tried to reconcile, didn't they?" Adeline pondered aloud. "I remember Mum brought me here a few times."
The sailor nodded. "They did, but it seems something didn't work out between them. I can't tell you more. I don't know myself."
The old man shrugged and took the whistling kettle off the stove. "It's a shame it turned out this way," Adeline said sadly. They sat in silence for a while before the host remembered something and looked at her with interest.
"You know, Melody, even though she married Henry, your grandfather, she loved another man all her life."
"Really?" Adeline asked in surprise.
"Indeed," the sailor winked. "His name was Earl. He was handsome, like that foreign actor all the girls used to swoon over. Oh, Alain Delon, I think that was his name."
When Adeline finished laughing, the sailor continued.
"But the story is actually sorrowful. Melody fell in love with this visiting sailor so deeply that we thought she might do something to herself when she found out the Earl had gone missing at sea."
Adeline's face darkened. "And they never found him?"
"No, we hid the truth from her until the very end. And when she finally learned it, Melody cried so loudly that her wails could be heard throughout the neighbourhood. She never accepted his death."
Adeline was deeply moved by her grandmother's tragic love story and even shed a few tears.
"Melody remained faithful to her love until the last day. She carried that love in her heart through the years."
"Thank you for sharing," Adeline said. "It was so important for me to learn about my family's history. You know, until now, I grew up thinking I had no relatives besides my mum. I got used to living a secluded life with her after my dad passed away." Adeline hugged the sailor goodbye, thanked him once more, and headed home. In the evening, Jacob caused a major argument and then reminded her of the purpose of their trip.
"Instead of wandering around with who knows who, you should be looking for clients for your house. Maybe one of the local wealthy residents would want this place for a villa. I did make a request through a realtor, but—"
"I'm still thinking about whether to sell Grandma's house," Adeline suddenly announced.
"What? I can't believe what I'm hearing," Jacob exclaimed. "Adeline, we had an agreement. Or did that old man fill your head with nonsense about preserving your inheritance and all that?"
"Don't you dare speak to me in that tone," Adeline snapped. "How dare you mock the memory of my family?" She shook her head and said sadly, "I'm starting to regret this whole trip." With that, she stormed off to another room, slamming the door behind her. After a couple of days of anxious waiting, Jacob finally received the much-anticipated phone call. Mr. Perez requested a meeting, and when Jacob arrived, he eagerly shared the news.
"I have something that will make you thrilled. Representatives of a large construction company from the north have contacted me. They have grand plans for your wife's land." "And what are they offering?" Jacob asked, trying to sound calm, though his heart was racing with anticipation. "The company specializes in building premium hotels. They want to acquire the land where your house stands to build a massive grand hotel, a resort-style establishment with top-notch amenities for clients with platinum cards. I think you can imagine they won't be concerned about the price."
If the realtor had known the turmoil inside Jacob at that moment, he might have tripled his commission. But years of deal-making had taught Jacob to maintain a poker face.
"I need to think about the details to ensure these clients are reliable. Let's meet in 3 days and I'll give you my final answer." "Very well, it's your call," Mr. Perez replied. "Just remember, these people don't like to wait."
Jacob left the meeting with dignity and hurried to the airport. That morning he received an unexpected message from Josephine. Tired of waiting, she decided to come and check on the progress herself.
"What are you doing here?"
Jacob hissed, hauling her suitcase out of the taxi.
"I told you to come only after my call."
"Why are you so upset?" Josephine batted her eyelashes innocently. "Or have you changed your mind about including me in the sale?"
"Of course not,"
Jacob snapped, leading her to a nearby cafe to discuss the matter privately. Josephine and Jacob were so engrossed in their conversation that they didn't notice an elderly sailor sitting in the shade of a large decorative palm tree. The wide leaves concealed Mr. Sanchez from view, but he could hear every word of their scheming.
"You still haven't convinced your wife to sell the house?"
Josephine demanded.
"Do you think I haven't tried?"
Jacob exclaimed in frustration.
"Adeline has suddenly decided she might not sell her grandmother's house because of some sentimental family memories."
Josephine raised an eyebrow. "Oh, please, what nonsense. Tell her it's necessary for your business. Make something up. You're the husband after all, and she should listen to you." Mr. Sanchez, who had been listening intently, realized he couldn't stand idly by. Jacob was clearly a scoundrel, deceiving his wife to profit from her inheritance. The old sailor waited for Josephine and Jacob to leave the cafe and followed them, snapping photos with his old camera. He captured compromising images of the couple in intimate poses. That evening, Jacob returned to the apartment and aggressively pressured Adeline to sell the house. However, she remained firm in her decision. "Jacob, I've thought long and hard about this," Adeline said slowly, "and I've decided not to sell Grandma's house. I can't give up a place where my mum and Melody grew up." Instead of responding, Jacob wrung his hands in despair.
"I've been trying to hide this from you because I didn't want to upset you, especially after losing the baby," he began. "But the truth is, if we don't sell this land, we won't have anything to live on."
Looking into Adeline's astonished eyes, Jacob felt a glimmer of hope that his manipulation might still work. It seemed he had found the right nerve to press.
"You know, dear, the business is on the brink of bankruptcy. Things have been going terribly wrong lately. Clients are leaving one after another, turning to our competitors."
Jacob pretended to be incredibly angry about the situation. "How could this happen? You've been actively attending meetings these past months, saying you secured 4 new contracts." Adeline couldn't believe her husband's words.
"Forgive me." The man fell to his knees before her. I know I've been a fool, hiding the truth from you, but only you can save our future now. By selling this cottage and the land for a hotel, we can start over."
Adeline was utterly confused. Could her husband be telling the truth? But if so, it would be selfish not to help him in this situation.
"Please, my love."
Jacob's pleas made her doubt her decision. I need to think about it. I'm sorry." Adeline struggled to free herself from her husband's grasp and rushed out of the apartment. Hoping the elements would guide her to the right decision, Adeline found herself at her grandmother's house without realizing it. The sea was restless that evening. Heavy waves crashed onto the sandy shore, warning her not to come too close. "It seems a storm is coming," she thought, and decided to take shelter in the house. As she approached the door, she noticed a paper envelope pinned to the window frame. Curious, she took it inside and hurriedly opened it. At that moment, the first thunderclaps echoed outside. "Oh no!" Adeline exclaimed, freezing as she saw the contents of the envelope. Black and white photographs of Jacob in the arms of his mistress scattered across the floor. Among the photos, she found a note with 3 words written in shaky handwriting. "Do not trust him." Someone was warning her about Jacob's true motives, so Adeline decided to stay the night at her grandmother's house, especially since an icy rain was now lashing outside. The night was restless. The roaring sea kept her awake, and the thoughts of her husband's infidelity tormented her already weary soul. Early the next morning, Adeline returned to the apartment and threw the photographs at her husband. "So, that's how you're worried about our family's future?" she asked bitterly.
"Adeline, what's gotten into you?"
Jacob stammered, picking up the incriminating photos from the floor. Realizing his wife knew the truth about him and Josephine, he laughed grimly. "You won't get my land or my house. We're getting a divorce," Adeline declared resolutely. "You can go back to the city with your mistress."
"Oh, so now you want to live in this rundown shack?"
Jacob sneered.
"Looking for some thrills? You'll die there during the first storm."
"Well, I survived last night," Adeline calmly retorted. "You've always underestimated me. I'll send the divorce papers later by courier. Goodbye." With those words, Adeline left, freeing herself from the shackles of her sham marriage. Soon she moved her belongings to her grandmother's house. She decided to collect the rest of her things from their cottage later and, for now, buy only the essentials to make the little house cosy again. The following days were blissful. She turned off her phone so her husband could no longer bother her with his incessant calls and endless requests to sell the house. Adeline realized there wasn't a shred of truth in anything Jacob had said. It pained her to think she had spent so many years with someone who never truly valued her. Walking along the shore, Adeline noticed a charming red-haired girl standing before an easel, diligently painting the sea landscape. "You're quite talented," Adeline remarked, admiring the seascape. "Believe me, it looks very impressive." "Thank you," the girl smiled shyly. "I'm Peyton. I often work here in the mornings. The view is excellent, and the light falls beautifully on that cliff." She pointed to a towering cliff jutting out over the turbulent sea. From a distance it seemed as if the cliff was slicing through the waves with its sharp base. Adeline introduced herself and invited her new acquaintance for tea. To her delight, Peyton agreed, but mentioned she couldn't stay long as she was caring for her sick mother. "I understand," Adeline sympathized. "There's nothing harder than seeing a loved one suffer." "We're managing," Peyton replied with a smile. "I hope the local gallery will buy my paintings. I have a friend there who might recommend them for an exhibition in the capital." Adeline was captivated by this charming and modest young woman. She felt she had finally found a kindred spirit. They could spend hours talking about art, painting,
and how difficult it can be to survive in the world without any support. Soon, Adeline and Peyton became truly close friends. Adeline was genuinely surprised at how she had found her a good friend in this seaside town in just a few weeks. "Let's go to our art gallery," Peyton suggested one day. "I want to show you my favourite works by local emerging artists, and you can judge our provincial potential," the girl joked. Adeline agreed, and they arranged to meet at the gallery at 4:00. However, when Adeline arrived at the remote part of the city where the gallery was located, she was surprised to find that her friend was not there. "Peyton, I'm here. Where are you?" She sent a voice message. The reply came almost immediately. "Adeline, I'm sorry. My mum suddenly felt ill. I'll be a little late, but I'll be there soon. Wait for me. Don't go anywhere, or we'll miss each other." Worried about her friend, Adeline waited for her near the gallery, also taking the opportunity to explore the nearby area. Meanwhile, Peyton, standing on the seashore near Adeline's house, stealthily circled the old building, making sure no one was around. Assured that no one would disturb her, the girl deftly pried open the latch on the old window with a pocket knife and silently slipped into the house. "Well, shall we begin?" she whispered, dropping to her knees in the far part of the house and methodically tapping the floorboards, searching for hollow spaces beneath them. In reality, Peyton had deliberately befriended Adeline, skillfully reading her psychological needs and posing as an artist. She was a cunning con artist who bought paintings from a young homeless man named Ronald, who lived in another part of the city. Ronald lived in a makeshift tent on the seashore, but created such masterpieces that, in Peyton's opinion, they could be displayed in a museum. Peyton was lucky to have found Ronald, as his painting style suited perfectly her plan to create a convincing image in Adeline's eyes. Gaining the trust of a lonely city dweller with a troubled past was a simple matter for her. Peyton had done her research and knew who Adeline and her husband were. When she learned that the house might soon be sold, she realized she had to act quickly before access to Melody's cottage was closed to her. Peyton came from a criminal clan of local smugglers who dealt in the illegal import and export of exclusive goods and stolen artworks for foreign collectors. Recently, she had come across her cousin's diary, who had died years ago in a shootout during a smuggling operation. The diary revealed a note about hidden treasure, part of which was concealed in Adeline Taylor's house. The cousin wrote about a successful heist of rare diamonds, which were divided among the crew. Earl, a young sailor who regretted getting involved, confided in Peyton's uncle that he planned to hide his share in his beloved Melody's house. Peyton knew that such treasures were often hidden in the crawl space, so she was confident she could find the jewel box herself. Her intuition did not fail her. Several floorboards indeed looked like concealing a secret. Just as she was about to use a crowbar she had brought, she heard a male voice here. "And what is this expressive lady doing in my ex-wife's house?" A velvety male voice suddenly asked from behind her. Turning around, Peyton saw Jacob standing there. The man looked very charming in his light cotton suit, a slight smile playing on his lips. Instantly a new plan formed in the young smuggler's mind. "Actually, I came to visit a friend," she said coquettishly, "but it seems I should talk to you first." Peyton quickly realized she could exploit the discord in the couple's relationship for her own purposes. After a bit of flirting, she cautiously detailed the hidden treasure in the house. But they needed time to check everything in the house and find hidden treasure. Upon hearing this, Jacob's expression changed. Success had never been so close. The prospect of selling the house profitably and obtaining the hidden diamonds was so tempting that he decided to cast aside his conscience and eliminate his stubborn, unwanted wife. "Here, if you go to this spot and do the right things, no one will ever find Adeline. It's very deep, Peyton instructed Jacob, pointing out a suitable location on the map for his dark deed. Well done, Jacob praised. You're clever, unlike my boring wife. I promise you won't regret helping me. Peyton only smiled slyly. She had encountered men like him before and was convinced that they were good for business but nothing more. Peyton had no idea that the young criminal planned to dispose of him once he helped her find the treasure. The next day, Jacob spent all his time trying to persuade Adeline to meet with him. He had rented a small boat in advance and planned to take a trip to a picturesque bay where they could discuss everything calmly. Adeline, come on, he pleaded. We've been married for 7 years. Can't we just meet and talk about the divorce like civilized people? I promise I won't bring up the house again. Adeline had no desire to see or hear from the scoundrel. However, she couldn't deny that, after living with him for so long, she still felt something. Deciding there was no harm in a simple conversation, Adeline agreed to go on the boat to see the beautiful secluded bay. Along the way, Jacob behaved very gallantly, even offering her a glass of wine, which she declined. Suit yourself, he said, downing his glass in one gulp. The next moment he shouted, pointing behind her, Look! Look! Is that a pod of dolphins? Unsuspecting, Adeline turned around and immediately felt a powerful blow to her head. Sparks flashed before her eyes, and then she felt the cold seawater enveloping her body. There you go, Adeline, out of sight, out of mind, Jacob muttered, then quickly sped away from the scene. Fortunately, he didn't notice the homeless man sitting on a small rock nearby, the same one from whom Peyton had bought paintings. Ronald was sunbathing when he heard a short scream and saw Jacob pushing his wife into the water. Without hesitation, the young man dove in after Adeline, fighting the waves and strong current. With great difficulty, he managed to spot her sinking body underwater. Pulling her to the shore, he administered first aid and immediately called an ambulance. The paramedics praised the homeless man for his quick action, noting that if Adeline had been underwater any longer, she wouldn't have survived. They then took her to the nearest hospital, while Ronald remained on the shore trying to make sense of the crime he had witnessed. Adeline lay in the hospital, recovering from the attempted murder. She had regained consciousness, but remembered nothing of the boat trip. Her last memory was of her husband inviting her to see the bay to discuss their impending divorce. After that, there was only darkness. Meanwhile, Peyton, learning of the failed attempt on Adeline's life, decided to cover her tracks. She went to the police, claiming she had witnessed Ronald trying to drown Adeline in the sea. "That bum has lost his mind," she cried to the officers, pretending to be a grieving friend. "I've heard artists can go crazy, but Ronald seems to have had a complete breakdown. He just lost control." As a result, the young homeless man was shocked when, just hours later, police arrested him on the city promenade where he was selling his paintings. Ronald was thrown in a cell, and no one listened to his claims that Adeline's own husband had tried to kill her. "Cut the act," the investigator snapped at him. "Everyone knows your mother was sent to an asylum for stabbing your father. How do we know you didn't try to drown the woman and then came to your senses and called the doctors?" "It wasn't me," Ronald wearily shook his head. "Do you really love Peyton more than me? She's one of those criminals herself." "It's controversial, but we certainly believe that a well-known businessman in the capital wouldn't like to kill his wife, especially when she had just lost a child a month ago." Further arguments were pointless. Meanwhile, Jacob was trying to calm himself in this apartment, downing burning whiskey. He had already heard that Adeline was alive. Peyton had warned him. She had managed to pin everything on a local homeless man, but she didn't know how much time they had left before the police started asking uncomfortable questions. Jacob wanted to leave the city immediately, but at the last minute, he remembered the hiding place in his wife's house. Deciding to try his luck one last time, the man set out for the seashore under the cover of night. He broke the lock on the house and, recalling Peyton's instructions, began his search. Soon he found the hollow floorboards. Pulling a crowbar from his bag, Adeline's husband began prying up the boards one by one. When the last board cracked loudly, he heard another strange sound. It was a secret mechanism that the cautious Earl had installed long ago in case robbers or smugglers broke into Melody's house. In the next moment, Jacob saw the concrete wall above him slide smoothly aside and a stone slab crashed down on the businessman, burying him with his dream of the treasure. By a strange coincidence, at the moment the concrete slab fell on Jacob, Adeline, lying in the hospital, suddenly remembered all the details of the attempt on her life. She recalled how Jacob had tried to offer her wine and then struck her and pushed her into the water. The next morning, learning from the news that an innocent man had been accused in her case, Adeline asked the investigator to come to her and tell her what had really happened. Ronald was released that same day. After her discharge, Adeline went to the place where the young vagabond lived. She wanted to thank him personally and apologize for the fact that he had almost been sent to prison because of Peyton. Besides, the cunning smuggler disappeared from the city just a few hours after the vagabond's release from custody. The girl decided to lay low for a while, with her criminal relatives in another state. As for Jacob, he survived the fall of the slab, but could no longer walk. His spine was too severely damaged. The former businessman was now forced to move exclusively in a wheelchair, and to stand on his feet again, he needed to invest a lot of effort and money for rehabilitation. As soon as he regained consciousness and realized the grim news about his health, the man first called his lawyer. He was incredibly afraid of the trial and the police, but Adeline was not so cruel as to send an invalid to prison. She felt that her husband had already been sufficiently punished for all the harm he had caused her, so she did not file a complaint against him, which completely astonished Jacob. Adeline focused on restoring the house, with great help from the young artist who showed genuine affection for her. Interestingly, the treasure that everyone coveted turned out to be a dud. The young sailor did not know that he himself had been deceived, with the stones in the box replaced at the last moment with ordinary seaside pebbles and newspaper clippings. Earl had promised his beloved that he would return for her, but he perished, and Adeline's heartbroken grandmother never knew that there was a hiding place in her house. Adeline and Ronald happily settled in the fully restored house. The couple married a year after the events, and soon Adeline became pregnant and gave birth to beautiful twins, a boy and a girl. Ronald later sold his paintings to a famous Capitol gallery and gained national fame, and orders poured in. Mr. Sanchez continued to visit Adeline and her new husband, and couldn't help but delight in their kids, who always called him grandfather, bringing tears to the lonely sailor's eyes each time. Jacob reassessed his life. The man found work as a volunteer in a social foundation, helping people with disabilities to socialize and live more fulfilling lives. He continued to run his business, but was content with much more modest results and no longer chased easy money, having learned his lesson from fate.